Welcome to the Car Guys, and this week's episode is a somewhat painful look at the 9 cars I never should have bought. This video will not be pretty. I mean, obviously, I'm the one presenting it, but also because it contains a litany of cars and experiences that have blighted my own car-owning history. I present my pain now for your viewing pleasure and as a cathartic exercise so that I can heal and move on. One thing's for sure though, at the end of this episode, you're going to be spitting feathers, you're going to be shouting at the screen, or possibly you're going to be sympathising. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and if I had been in possession of it, then maybe I could have avoided some of the personal and financial disasters that I'm going to tell you about. I'm proud to say that in my car-owning life, I have owned 50 cars, one for every year that I've been alive. And whilst it's tempting to think that by looking at a garage chock full of supercars that I have had somewhat of a charmed life when it comes to the cars I've owned, it turns out there have been plenty of missteps along the way. This episode started out as 7 cars, but it turns out I've been even dumber than I thought. And by the way, if you enjoy this channel and you appreciate its open and honest approach, then please feel free to give us a subscribe. And also, if you like this episode, then why not like it too? It really does help us to develop and build the channel going forwards. So then, 9 cars that I should never have bought. And I should mention that this episode was inspired by one that I did on my watch channels, CarGuys.TV, on pretty much the same subject. You really liked that, and I thought, let's do it for cars. First up then, the MG Metro, and I should never have bought this car because frankly, there were many other choices that I could have gone for that would have been far cooler as my first car. And we all know, viewers, that your first car, well, I mean, that's forever, isn't it? And especially if you work in the automotive industry, when everyone asks that question, what was your first car? I'm going to have to sheepishly look at my feet, shuffle around, and then under my breath whisper, MG Metro. So I'm afraid, yes, this orange turd was my first car. And the reason I bought this car was simple. It was quite cheap, and also, crucially, my father had owned one in the past, and he said he could easily fix them. So that was it. He did negotiate 300 quid off the initial purchase price of £1,295. The downsides of the MG Metro, well, they're very fragile, they're deeply uncool, having the association of being a granny's car. They're not particularly nice inside, they're not very fast, they're very rattly. My one constantly blew its distributor cap off, and also the ignition key didn't quite fit in the ignition block, and therefore sometimes I just couldn't even start the bugger. And mine also, uniquely, because I bought it from a farmer, smelt quite a lot like cow shit. The simple fact is, it was the start of the 1990s, and there were many, much cooler cars that I could have bought. I could and should have bought, for example, a humble Ford Fiesta like my best friend Ryan Phillips. I should have bought a Ford Orion Ghia. There was a beautiful white one with all the body kit. I should have bought a VW Golf, a Peugeot 205, a Peugeot 309, a Honda Prelude, a Mini for goodness sakes, a BMW at a push, and of course a Saab 900 for Christ's sakes. I mean, I could have bought any of those cars, and I didn't. And so forever, my first car will be the MG Metro. And although I've got pictures like this to remind me of that car, I have to say that it was a deeply hateful experience. The Vauxhall Astra SX 5-door in red. Why should I never have bought this car? Well, mainly it's because I replaced a red Astra with a red Astra, and that's something you should never ever do. I had a 3-door Astra which I absolutely loved and unfortunately crashed, and I decided to replace it quite quickly with a 5-door version, which was deeply uncool because it was the SX and not the SXI, and especially it wasn't the GTE, which was absolutely glorious, one of the most exciting hot hatches of the day, and I ignored that entirely and got this. It doesn't help, of course, that also the close ratio gearbox, a feature of this car, broke, and so I had to replace it, and that cost, I think, 1,800 quid. And it also doesn't help that pretty soon after I bought it, thieves tried to nick it and ended up sawing off the steering wheel and then leaving it nicely on the driver's seat for me to find. So I had to then drive it round using a monkey wrench until I could get it fixed. The 90s, eh? What a crazy time for motoring. And here we are, the Lamborghini Huracan Performante. What on earth, Damian, is this doing on the list? It makes no sense. It's one of the most accomplished, brilliant all-round supercars that there's ever been. It's a Lamborghini. Come on, what are you talking about?
Oh, well, allow me to retort.
This car was purchased new from Lamborghini Edinburgh, who I will go out of my way and say are fantastic, by the way. If you're going to get a Lamborghini, definitely consider it from them. It was bright green, Verde Mantis. I figured if you're going to get the hot Lamborghini, you might as well go absolutely bonkers and get a bright green one. But having driven this car and featuring it on the channel in the early days, I just didn't gel with it. I found it way too synthetic. I found it quite detached from the driving experience. It sounded fantastic. It obviously looked incredible. The four-wheel drive and all of that power meant that it was an absolute weapon on the road. But I just found it way too computerized and it just didn't engage me. Very rarely did I look back at it and think, whoa, can't believe I've got one of these cars, which is absolutely what you should always do. I respect it, yes, of course. And if anyone asks me, I would always say that the Performante is an incredible car, but they built way too many of them. And for me, I just didn't gel with it. It didn't match my character. I think I am much more of a Ferrari man than a Lamborghini one. And speaking of Ferrari, here it is, my Ferrari 488 GTB. Now this was a beautiful car, but the reason why I should never have bought it is it's a car that I bought in order to get another car. Now this was a beautiful car, an incredible spec, very highly spec'd, and I absolutely enjoyed the specking process. But I have to say, I find the 488, the basic one, a bit too boring. I don't find it's got that much character, and therefore it was just a means to an end, and that means you never feel that special about a car that's a means to an end. The downside for me, of course, is that because I bought that car to get another one, and because I then sold it relatively quickly, I lost nearly 80,000 quid, and that means that you've got a bad taste in your mouth. What I should have done is not bought that car, but still petition Ferrari to try and get the pista, and hopefully I would have got one. But because of the financial loss and the disappointment of the driving experience, yeah, I probably should never have bought it. And now we have the Bentley Continental R, which I mistakenly bought at auction by raising my hand at the wrong time. I kind of went along with it because it was such a majestic beast, and we should remember that this was essentially the car that started the Car Guys channel. It was our very first episode, which is still on there and still something you should probably check out, if only to see how different the channel was back then to now, which is not that different at all. It was in pink, okay, officially wild berry, but I have to say the Bentley Continental R was not really me. I'm far more interested in the Rolls-Royce Phantom Coupe, as you already know, but this Bentley, although huge and large and long and majestic, was a bit too creaky and a bit too old and terrifying potential running costs. It wasn't that fast. It was sort of very much in an old man spec and felt quite fragile. So although it kicked off the channel, I probably should never have bought it. The Porsche Boxster S. Now this one is a bit of a sore point because so many things happened around this car, but the reason I should never have bought it is because it was offered to me in order to get another car, and I will never do ever again, but I had to buy this car in order to qualify for a 718 Spider, which is the car I really wanted. There I was at the Porsche dealership. I was sort of between a rock and a hard place, and I was in a jovial mood, so I thought, yeah, you know what, I will buy it. And I got the Boxster S because I thought, well, that's the sort of nicer version, so perhaps I won't lose as much depreciation on that one. I was only going to keep it for about 6 months, so I thought, well, I'll buy smart, I'll buy this one because it definitely won't lose my shirt on it. And unfortunately, yeah, I'd sort of lost, I don't know, £25,000 in 6 months. So I was quite bitter about the fact that I had been forced to buy the car and then lost a load of money, because of course that means effectively I've paid £25,000 more for my 718 Spider. I might as well have just gone out and bought one on the overs market once they were launched. But the 718 Boxster S also had a few other problems as well. For a start, I hated the engine. It's a 4-cylinder turbo. It sounds horrendous. It's got a lot of lag in it, especially when it's cold. It's just a horrible, uncharacterful, soulless thing. Fast, absolutely, but I just hated the whole experience. It's a lovely car, don't get me wrong. People have slagged me off on the internet for daring to say that I didn't like a Boxster S, but I didn't like a Boxster S. And let's face it, it was my money. I'd bought the car. I'm entitled to be critical about it in any way I see fit. It doesn't help, of course, that soon after I bought my 718 Spider, unfortunately a customer services issue meant that I parted ways with that dealership. So any goodwill that I had from buying new Porsche at that dealership was gone. And that's pretty much where I am now. Because of the way that authorised dealers deal with their customers at Porsche, I'll probably never buy another new Porsche again. Here's one I don't even think you know about because I bought it off channel and I'm not sure I did absolutely anything on it. This was a Jaguar XJ40. Still to this day, have no idea why I bought this car. I think it was because it was light blue, it was incredibly low mileage, it had a titled former owner, and it was just the greatest example of the XJ40 that you'll ever see. So for some reason I bought this from Nutley Garage, and it was a beautiful car, but I discovered upon driving it that I'm just not really a Jaguar kind of guy. Also, because it was so low mileage, it was one of those ones where you felt guilty about even taking it out at all and about exposing it to the elements. It's the sort of thing that should be just in a beautiful airtight cocoon being treasured for future generations. It was luxurious to drive. It was everything I thought it would be, but I just realised as soon as I turned the key, yeah, that it wasn't for me. But it does have a happy ending because from the same garage, a Honda NSX appeared. So I basically just swapped the XJ40 for the Honda NSX that I now own. Aha! You knew it would be on the list somewhere, and it is. The Lotus Elise Final Edition. Now, of course, I should never have bought this because I sort of kind of did it for the wrong reasons. Lotus announced that they were stopping the Elise forever, and I suddenly desperately thought that I'd never owned a brand new Lotus and that perhaps this should be it. Now, that was my first mistake. My second mistake was in the speccing process, where because of COVID, I wasn't able to really get close up with the options and especially the colors, so I just picked from the online configurator. Never should have done that, and I picked a green that frankly I don't really like very much. And I have to confess that short of the Lotus Esprit, which is probably the one I should have gone for, I'm just not feeling it with Lotus. I don't feel particularly embraced by the brand, I don't feel particularly excited about this car, and as a result I probably should never have bought it. And here we are then, the 9th car that I never should have bought. And it's a controversial one because it's a car that is widely acknowledged to be one of the greatest ever made, is the Ferrari F12 TDF. And I had one and now I don't. So you might think that it's sour grapes, but let me tell you why I believe I should never have bought it. And the reason it's on this list is because it's lost the most money of any car I've ever lost. And the reason why I should never have bought it is bad timing. Bad timing when I bought it, and then especially bad timing when I sold it. This is, after all, a stupendous car. It's one of the all-time greats, a limited edition Ferrari. I wasn't lucky enough to be actually offered one, and when it was launched and announced, I didn't even particularly want one. But for some reason, a couple of years later, I got the bug bad and I decided I wanted the TDF, and unfortunately that meant they had appreciated quite a bit, so I paid nearly £900,000 100,000 of your English pounds for one of these cars. Now that was a lot of money, more money than I'd ever spent on a car, but I didn't care because I was all caught up in getting a TDF. And unfortunately what I then did is the cardinal sin. I paid the most money for a limited edition Ferrari, and then I dared to actually drive it. So I did put sort of 5,000 or 6,000 miles on my TDF, and then when I decided to sell it, unfortunately the market had dropped quite a bit. It's gone back up a little bit now, but it had dropped out, and so I lost nearly £300,000 on that car, and losing money is never fun, folks. Really what I should have done with that money was spend it on a 288 GTO, and then I would have my grail car right now, and I wouldn't have to worry ever again about depreciation. So there you go, guys. Those are the 9 cars I should never have bought. 9 out of 50. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you found it entertaining. If you like what we're doing on this channel, please subscribe, leave comments and likes, and there'll be another episode next week.